Welcome, Hannah. We look forward to your presentation. Hannah's going to, from the University of West of England, and going to tell us a bit about peer-to-peer support, and particularly within Wellbeing. So, yeah, over to you, Hannah.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Hannah. I'm here from UWE Bristol with my colleague Caroline as well. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about how academic wellbeing is supported at UWE Bristol, and specifically through our peer-to-peer support offer. So at UWE Bristol, we call this our PAL scheme. Other universities might call it PAS or supplemental instruction or PALS, maybe peer mentoring. People in the room, do your institutions run something like this, maybe? Yes. Is it situated in the library? No, yes. In some cases, yes. And do people know nothing about it? Yes, maybe. Okay, excellent. So the aim of what I'm going to cover today is, so first of all, exploring wellbeing in HE and why it's really important that we do look at specifically the academic wellbeing of students, how that's bolstered by peer-to-peer support. Secondly, define what is PAL. So like I said, we talk a lot about PAL, PAS, supplemental instruction, and those are all sort of brand names for peer-to-peer support. So what do we mean when we talk about PAL? So explore the change in remit of the library. So in the context of UWE Bristol, and now that PAL has come into the remit of the library, why has that been the case? Why is it really important that we tap into sort of library skills and librarians' skills and talents that they've already had? Review its successes. So like with anything, we want to talk about, are we reviewing it regularly? Does it work? Does it work within a library context? And then using facilitation rather than teaching techniques. So moving away from taking a teaching approach, looking at scaffolding study support for learners through the use of peer mentors and peer supporters. Okay, so if academic pressure is cited as the primary cause of stress for students, I wanted to pose this question: do we have a wellbeing crisis in our midst? So specifically in HE, does academic pressure propose that there's a crisis going on? And I'll let you read through these three quotes, which I think probably do suggest that that's the case. So we're right up to the moment with this last one, really, and I think it's really important that we're looking at specifically the wellbeing and mental health of students in an HE environment. So why is it, like that middle quote suggests, that students report significantly lower levels of mental wellbeing than the general population? So we're not just talking about an age group or an underrepresented group or anyone, a specific, an 18-year-old's mental health. We're talking about what is it about the academic experience that's reducing their sense of mental wellbeing overall. So if the HE sector is experiencing a mental health crisis, it's crucially important that we're not contributing to this by schemes that we're putting in place, and that we're actually trying to bolster their support. And whilst we can't control the mental health of students we come into contact with, and it's a problem with many different faces, we can promote academic wellbeing through co-curricular provision like PAL and a lot of the academic services that libraries offer. So promoting healthy and sustainable learning environments is one of the ways that we combat this crisis, and the culture that we're promoting with our peer-to-peer support builds positive wellbeing in individuals. So what we're trying to do is give the power back to the students, and you'll see this in a kind of dual approach, so people that we employ as PAL leaders and also the students that attend the PAL sessions. So it in turn reduces their risk of poor mental health, and peer-to-peer support is used to promote self-efficacy in students. So you'll see me talk about that a lot. It's about giving them back the power, it's making them feel empowered. And it's sort of, we're doing it sort of under the radar. They don't realise that attending an academic intervention like PAL is actually bolstering their sense of mental well-being. But if academic pressure is a massive cause of stress for them, if they feel more secure in their academic environment, then of course they're going to lessen their risk of mental health problems. So at UWE Bristol, we are committing to putting mental health first, as I'm sure a lot of other institutions are. And because university is a time of great transition for students, and it's not without its challenges, there's lots of things that they have to contend with. So tuition fees, living costs, the jobs market when they leave university, the impact of social media. So all of these things are possible scenarios that previous generations didn't have to deal with. And this video nicely explains that before we're thinking about that assignment that a student's got due in, or whether or not their writing is academic enough, or whether they can reference correctly, they're already contending with these sorts of issues. So you may be thinking, why is this relevant to academic support? What does it mean in terms of academic well-being? Well, we believe that by advancing the academic literacy of our students, when we look at these issues in a holistic way, we are able to bolster the mental wealth of students. Our strategy moves towards delivering a joined-up and collaborative approach that takes into account lots of different services across the university, and academic support is just one of them. So peer-to-peer support that I'm going to talk to you about is that sort of safety net that we're offering students, or maybe not even the safety net, maybe it's the rope that they don't know that they're attached to. It's sort of implemented on a programme, in a timetable, they're not sure why they're attending it at first, and then actually they slowly begin to realise, or maybe they don't actually realise that's why, that probably is us doing our job quite well if they don't, that that's been a major factor in them feeling more confident in their academic studies. So as with any strategy, there's a diagram that goes with it. And this is our proposal for how we at UWE Bristol are going to support mental health and wellbeing. So, of course, we need to, there needs to be prevention, and massive investment into prevention services, mental health services, student support services is really, really important. But I think it's important that we take into account that we have to, use data. We have to make informed decisions. We have to measure the impact of the things that we're putting in place. We have to use partnerships, so we have to tap into external and external experts in these areas in order to support students. There's no use us doing everything in-house with perhaps not the specialist knowledge, especially like what we've, the previous presentation. It's about tapping into external networks to really get that specialist knowledge. It's making sure that our leadership is, spearheading this campaign. For us, it's really important that it's right on the top of the agenda, that we offer peer support. It's making sure that all of our academic interventions are that all of our sort of vice-chancellor and the people who head up the university are aware of those interventions. And then we fall specifically in this support strand, and the library does as well. So we're offering support that's effective and evidenced. So making sure that academic support, embedded sessions, optional sessions are effective, they're evidence-based, and of course they're supportive. So our peer-to-peer offer is a student-centred approach. It's a student-centred approach that creates networks of study partners for students. So it's an additional mechanism for communication and feedback between teaching staff and students, as well as aiming to produce ready and able graduates. So it's got this kind of triad thing going on where the person who attends it gains a lot, but the peer-assisted learning leader also gains a lot, but the person who works within the faculty also gains a lot because they can tap into the opinions of the student via their peer. Feedback is really hard to gather, so it's just another way that the university is working together. So I think this next quote is really important because it does show that reciprocal learning that's going on. I'll let you read that. So I really like this quote from Neve because we're talking about students becoming more confident. So the level 1 students that attend her PAL session have become more confident and independent, knowing that they can speak directly to another student and there's no academic in the room. But also it's quite reflective for her herself because it says, I feel speaking about how you have developed your work encourages students. So it's increased her awareness of how important it is to reflect on our own practice and share that with students in the room. So we've talked a bit about what academic wellbeing is and where that fits more generally in a wider wellbeing strategy. But I'm going to sort of reverse that and then have a think about where PAL comes from and then how the two marry up together. So SI, PAS, PALS, like I said, these are 3 different words. They all basically mean the same thing. But it started off as supplemental instruction. that was developed in 1973 at the University of Missouri. And it was created to decrease the attrition rates of minority students in healthcare professions. Quite relevant for the audience today. And it migrated across the Atlantic, as these things do after a good amount of time. And in 2002, the International Centre for Supplemental Instruction was formed. And what that meant is that in Europe, and specifically in the UK, we were able to produce certified trainers who could support these supplemental instruction and PASS sort of principles within their institutions. It also means that there's a sort of quality assurance process, and there's a grounding behind when we're setting up a peer support scheme. So it's not just students going in, chatting about whatever they want. There is a structure to the whole process. And then if you specifically wanted to look at some information or attend the certified training programme, the University of Lund in Sweden runs it for Europe, where they call it PASS, so peer assisted study sessions, and in the UK and specifically at UWE Bristol we call it peer assisted learning. So that's why you can see at the top, SI PASS and PAL, they all basically mean the same thing. They're different flavours of the same thing, but we're all talking about peer-to-peer support. So the main goals of peer-to-peer support and supplemental instruction specifically are to improve learning. So to improve, and I think that's deliberately quite broad, because it's not just to improve the learning for the students who are attending, it's to improve everyone's learning, so the PAL leader as well. To increase continued enrolment and retention, so that's something that we're increasingly seeing, that academic staff are looking to us to use this as a bit of a retention tool as well. So it's about making students feel that they've got a more they've got a holistic understanding of what it means to be in a cohort of 500 business management students, where you might see a different lecturer every single time and you may not know anybody on the course. It's creating that sort of learning community, which again, in turn, it aids retention. And then it's improving student performance, because, like I said, it's a scaffolded study support session. So we're making sure that that time is on their timetable for them to talk about their knowledge, share their knowledge, and upskill. So it's obviously going to improve the student performance. So the three goals, taking the three goals in mind, this sentence from the PASS PAL training I thought was really important. So this gives you a real idea of what we mean when we're talking about peer-to-peer support in this context. So for us, it has to be connected to a course, much like embedded sort of library teaching. It has to focus on already presented material, so the students have to have some knowledge. So generally, the PAL session would be at the end of the day or at the end of the week, where they would consolidate the learning from that week. And it has to be through student collaboration. So the peer leader in the room has to be a student themselves, they have to have done the course themselves, and they have to work together. And we really emphasise in the training that a PAL session isn't going to be very productive unless you get everybody in the room involved. You have to be sharing and collaborating in order for it to work. So you might be wondering where the library fits into all of this. And all I've said so far is that we are based within the library. Well, if I give you a look at our two aims, and you can have a read of those. They're very obviously highlighted two phrases in there. Okay, so what we wanted to do when we moved into the library was to harness the learning and teaching expertise that the library already provided. So they were already sort of the gold standard throughout the university of providing academic co-curricular provision, embedded academic skills approaches, optional academic skills approaches. So rather than just coming into our wider student success services umbrella with student support and placements team, we wanted to actually come right within the academic skills provision that the library offers. And the library's approach to learning and teaching activities gives students of all levels the support they need, and POW is really bolstering that level 1 and foundation support that you'll see after. You'll see in a moment. So I think this testimonial next as well, another video, is it's really important, because what it shows is how some of the learning that might occur in a library session or in some embedded library teaching can also be bolstered by POW support. So this is Richard, one of our POW leaders, who's talking about well, you'll see, I won't spoil it for you.
Light bulb moments seem to be making what seemed complicated actually straightforward. For example, first years always stress about referencing, so they think it might be the Da Vinci Code or something like that, but actually when you break it down for them, spend a little time working it out, it's actually quite straightforward, but you just got to kind of keep working on it, really.
So I think that's really nice because it, obviously it makes us wonder, why aren't they going to the specialist referencing workshops? Why is it that they're still coming to their PAL sessions struggling with referencing? But if we take this sort of multifaceted approach to supporting students with something like referencing, we're going to try and catch them all. PAL really works in that supportive environment. So he's not stood at the front telling them how to reference. They're probably working it out together on a table at a whiteboard. It's just a different way of learning. So specifically at UWE Bristol, just a little potted history of how we've been running. So we've been there since 2002, which is quite early if you think about that slide with the map on it, because it only came over to Europe in sort of early 2000. But we came into part of the UWE Library Services since 2016. So very newly part of the library services, and it's been quite a transition to change our approaches, and it's also been really useful. I'll talk about that in a minute because we've been able to use some of the staff from the library. But yeah, only very newly part of the library. We're centrally coordinated, so we're a hub and spoke model. So the PAL office sits within library services. We coordinate all of the PAL offer, so paying the PAL leaders, organising their training, supporting them, running the Blackboard module that they're attached to. But we couldn't run without the use of faculty members of staff, library staff, timetabling, HR, basically any service you can think of that's in an HE environment, we have to use in some way. The PAL leaders, without whom the scheme absolutely couldn't run, because they're the ones who go in and run the scheme themselves, are paid casual workers. So we do pay them to run the sessions. So it's a really nice earn while you learn opportunity for them. It's voluntary for participants, but so is everything on their course. So, we'd like them to go to this as well if they possibly can. And programmes have to request PAL. So a programme or sometimes a module need to come to us because we need that buy-in from the academic in order for it to run properly. We need them to advertise it. We need them to really stand up in that first lecture and endorse the PAL sessions. That's the only way we're going to get people to go along. So we have 3 different flavours of PAL. Now, I've really only talked about sort of this green strand here so far. But in terms of academic PAL, that is collaborative group study support sessions that we run. So they're an hour long, they're facilitated by a PAL leader. And the emphasis in those sessions is on facilitation rather than teaching. So that's the main bulk of what our training covers. It's how do I facilitate rather than teach, which is actually a really hard skill to get them to unlearn because they're coming in and they're thinking, right, how do I prepare a PowerPoint? Or, where do I need to set learning objectives for this PAL session? And we're like, no, you don't need to do any of that. You need to facilitate the learning in the room. We're helping students to become independent learners. So, like I said, we want the students in the room to come with their questions. We want them to set the agenda for the session. And the sessions normally appear on timetables. So just in terms of a logistical thing, it will fall within all of their other academic content delivery. So it is very much targeted, it's embedded, and it's focused on a programme or a module. We also have a PAL mentoring strand, which is in quite early phases at the moment, where we only focus on UWE Care students. So UWE Care students are carers, care leavers, or students who are estranged from their families. And we match them up with a PAL mentor who's trained in sort of transitional and pastoral support. So they would offer them support around anything really, and it's again up to the student to set the agenda. But we've had a student take somebody to a society because they weren't sure how to join a society and they didn't want to go alone. We've had somebody refer the student to sort of a over Christmas care company to do some work while they were at university over Christmas because they couldn't go home to their family. So it's a lot more of a holistic pastoral support mechanism. Quite different for the library and for the academic skills offer to use, but we found it's been really, really useful so far, and we're hoping to extend that to other groups within the university. So that's definitely targeted support, like I said, at UWE Care students. And then we've got our PAL workshops. So many of you, I'm sure, run library academic skills workshops for students that are sort of bookable on whatever type of bookable method you use. But these work a lot in the same way, apart from they're run by PAL leaders. And we specifically focus on emotional resilience in these. So they're about equipping students with the skills to be resilient learners. So we're not about just providing them the support when they're rock bottom. We're actually equipping them with the skills to deal with university life, to deal with the transition into higher education, to deal with feedback. Lots of these things, it's the first time students have experienced maybe getting a negative comment. So we cover things like that a lot in our emotional resilience training. And that's open to all. So that's the way in which we can sort of cover all of our bases. We've got lots of targeted support, and then we've got lots of support that's open to everyone. So our principles, so like I said, we had those 3 main goals of SI Pass in its sort of original format. And then at UWE Bristol, we take on a specific set of principles because we're such a large university, we have to focus. So our main way we do that at the moment is by focusing on transitional support for students. So that's foundation, level 1 and direct entry students. It's people coming into the university, coming from a different type of study, perhaps coming from a different country, different university, and focusing on how we can help them transition into the university. It has to be facilitated by near peers for us. So it has to be facilitated by students who've crucially done the same subject and who are probably only a year or 2 above the students in the room. And that's really important because we've had some things before where we've had PhD students facilitating the sessions and they just don't, so the students have got nothing in common with that person stood up at the front. So it has to be a near peer. And they have to use mentoring and role modelling techniques rather than teaching techniques. So this is our main one and the one I like to shout about the absolute most. So it has to benefit all students regardless of current academic competency. So there is no minimum mark to come and attend PAL. In fact, we want the whole spectrum of students to come in. The ones right at the very top are going to learn something. The ones right at the very bottom are going to learn something. But they're probably also going to teach something to other people and swap over their knowledge. So it's absolutely beneficial to all students regardless of where they currently are. So crucially, it focuses on what and how you learn. So a lecture or a seminar might just focus on what you're learning, the subject at hand. PAL really focuses on how you learn. So it's equipping those students with the techniques to, maybe mind map or go a whole plethora of different ways in which you can learn and ways in which you can assimilate that knowledge. So it encourages collaborative and active learning. They're really important skills for students to learn for the workplace, but also when they're in things like seminars. And, obviously they're not going to get the most out of university unless they're being collaborative and active learners. And then it also gives the student the privacy to practice the subject, making mistakes and build confidence. So a lot of what we see in academic teaching is that a student is too scared to ask the question because they think, oh, it's already wrong and I don't want to embarrass myself. So a PAL session is going to give them the privacy to practice the subject, to ask those silly questions because it's facilitated by near peers. So we talked a little bit about, the evidence for this and are we putting these principles into practice? So a few statistics as usual. So 85% of students agreed they benefited from attending PAL, which is huge number of students. I'll let you read this quote. I've again highlighted some of the key points. So I think this highlights both, again, the student and the PAL leader experience. Chloe has got something out of her university experience by making it nice and diverse, by becoming a PAL leader, but she's also helped put year 1 students at ease when they're coming into university. And then a student from nursing midwifery has had a positive of their PAL experience has been increasing their confidence in talking to whole groups, which has been extremely useful for presentations on their course. So being the leader in that room has really helped them with their confidence when they then have to go on and deliver presentations. So we would say, yes, the principles do work in practice. So again, we want to look at how does this fit into library services aims. So why are we in the library and why does it work so well in the library? So think of our little roadmap of library services aims. So a library services needs to be learner-centred, it needs to be high quality, it needs to be embedded, and it needs to be real world. So for PAL, the way we're learner-centred is the focus of PAL is on the learner, so it's a student-run and student-led programme. You can't really say that about much else in the university, so it's completely student-based. It's high quality, so I'm going to talk a bit about this in a minute, but we tap into the expertise of library staff to quality assure. So we're making use of staff that are already best placed to advise on things like academic skills and using those to quality assure the scheme. It's embedded, so like I said, it's on timetables, it's discipline owned, programmes own PAL, they have to request it from us, we have to have that academic buy-in from them, and it's real world. So our PAL leaders, when they come and work for us, receive something called an ILM qualification in Institute of Leadership and Management. You guys have probably heard of that. They get a level 3 equivalent of an A-level in coaching and mentoring. So it's really going to set them apart from all of the other people graduating in their cohort. And what it does is it shows the workplace that they actually can put coaching and mentoring skills into practice. So within the library, what do we do with our lovely librarians that we co-opt into helping us with the PAL scheme every year? So the first thing is it really helps further their experience for HEA fellowship status. So a lot of them do an awful lot of teaching, but perhaps not a lot of assessing. So being part of our team of library trainers and assessors means that they help us assess the ILM work that comes in, and therefore they get the assessing experience to gain the HEA fellowship accreditation. So by marking ILM work. So they help us to train PAL leaders. So we have between 300 and 400 PAL leaders every year. They have a day and a half training. So it's a massive undertaking. We couldn't do it alone, just the 5 of us in the office. So every year we have some librarians or some library staff who come in and go on a train the trainer course. And then they then go out and train the PAL leaders. So they're helping to promote self-efficacy and confidence for students. So they're doing it sort of by proxy in a less obvious way than those academic skills sessions. They're training the trainers, and then the trainers are going out there to promote self-efficacy and confidence. They're quality assuring for us, so they're going in to observe PAL sessions and telling us if what's going on in the room is actually PAL. That's really important, that it's not just something like what I'm doing right now, where a PAL leader stood up at the front delivering a presentation. We need the sessions to be collaborative and supportive. And it's really important that somebody goes in every now and then just to check what's going on in the room is PAL. And it helps them develop a relationship with students. So I think sometimes their relationship with students can be a bit transactional. It might be across a desk, it might be quite remedial, it might be just at point of need. Whereas, if they're doing a day and a half of training with students, particularly from a cohort of students that is within their department or the subject that they're linked to, it really helps them to develop a relationship with students, get that ad hoc feedback, learn about the course. And again, it forms that relationship with the member of academic staff as well. So, specifically in the Faculty of Health and Applied Sciences, as this might be more relevant to you guys. So some sort of case studies of what we've managed to do with PAL is we've implemented a targeted PAL scheme into the physiology and pharmacology module that students were struggling with. So for all nursing students, child, adult, mental health and learning disability nursing, they have to take a physiology and pharmacology module in year 1. It's quite difficult, it's quite calculation heavy, and they were specifically struggling with that. So we recruited PAL leaders in just to deliver sessions on physiology and pharmacology, which has been fantastic. Paramedic science PAL leaders are absolute stars, linked with the Paramedic Student Society to provide bespoke sessions. So what they did is they had some OSCE exams coming up, they were going to be observed. The Paramedic Student Society already do, I think, like role-playing and scenarios, that sort of thing. So the Paramedic Science PAL leaders were like, well, why don't we just do that with them and deliver it at the same time and link up with them? So they went away and did that. And it just means that the paramedic students just get a bespoke feel for PAL on their course. So it doesn't have to be the same in every context. We really want to mould PAL to the really different, diverse courses, because we run everything from paramedic science to, law or something like that. And then our midwifery scheme supports practice-based learning by using the library's collection of anatomical models. So in our health library, we've got a collection of anatomical models. Our PAL leaders go in and borrow those, and then they run practice OSCE sessions for the students where they can make as many mistakes as they want and, you know, do something, I don't know, seriously damaging to the patient's health without their programme leader seeing that. So this is my Oprah moment and putting PAL back into practice. At the end of the aisles on this side, there are some cards under the seat, if you have a look. If we could really quickly just hand them out so everyone's got sight of one. Have you got them? Yeah. And while you're doing that, I'll just explain what this is. So within our PAL leader training, what we're trying to really get across to the students is about how we promote neurodiversity and how there are lots of different types of learners. So I'm sure you guys will have all come across these different learning styles before, but students often haven't. And what we like to do is give them these cards that are coming round to you. These are strategy cards, and they have some strategies for facilitating PAL sessions on them. And we like to ask them, no, the questions aren't on these slides, which learning style would your strategy card fit best with? So if you read that strategy on the card there, which of these learning styles do you feel like it would work best for? And then maybe why it wouldn't work well for other ones? I'll give you sort of, I don't know how long I've got left on time. 2-3 minutes to do that, maybe? Yeah, and talk to the people around you. So sorry it's not on the slide, but yeah, it's just looking at, on your strategy card that you've got in front of you, which of these learning styles do you think would benefit the most from it? Which ones do you think it would suit the best? Okay, so for a bit of feedback, does somebody want to read out or sort of briefly précis what's on their card and then which learning style they thought it might suit best with? Anyone?
I've got revision cards. Note cards can be used for vocabulary, formulas, concepts. Take a stack of cards and ask the students to construct cards during the session, like cues them and encourage students to place the relevant card in the location where they can access it to remember the important information. So probably a theorist or reflector.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. And then could you deliver it in an activist style? So this is what we would challenge our PAL leaders to do. I think, well, so yeah, potentially maybe by getting the students to make those revision cards A1 sized and then placing them on the board instead of placing them on their table or something like that. So we would try and encourage students to use these cards and then think about all the different ways that they can modify them for the different learner styles that they might potentially have in the room. Anyone else? Yeah?
I'm quite a fun sounding one. I would happily do this myself, but I am that kind of man. Memory preparation. So the idea is, does everyone remember the game where you've got a deck of cards and in the cards there are unique pairs and they're face down, you've got to turn them over, you've got to memorise where they all are and find the pairs. So you're doing this but with a vocabulary term and the definition. So you're trying to match up the vocabulary and the definition, but you're also got to remember where you think you saw the last one. So this sounds quite fun. For me, I thought this would be activist. It's got that problem-solving puzzle kind of element, and that definitely appeals to me. But
Yeah.
not sure if I could blend
Twist it.
to one of the other styles, but maybe I'm wrong with the...
No, yeah, definitely. I love it. Well, I think there's no right or wrong answers, but we really use this activity, and when we give the students these cards, they get 30 of them, they get all of the ones you've seen today. We challenge them to think about them in as many different scenarios as possible and imagine as many different types of learners being engaged with them as possible. But yeah, they're a really nice way to really explain the difference between facilitation and teaching for the students in the room, because that tends to be a bit of a penny drop moment when we hand out the strategy cards and they realise, oh yeah, okay, you don't have to deliver a presentation if you don't want to. You can, facilitate that learning in a really different way. One last of our PAL leaders about why they decided to become a PAL leader. And I really, really like this because I think it just goes to show the dual nature of where it helps students and how it promotes academic well-being for different layers of students.
I wanted to be a role model for first year students and help them out as much as possible, as the transition from high school into first year can be challenging, and therefore I just wanted to be there around to help.
So I think that was really nice and simple, but she just has a desire to help people and just to be there and to be a role model, and she's aware of how difficult that transition can be. And this is why it's a really fulfilling scheme to run for students. And in summary, that's why it's really important that the scheme is peer-led. So one way that we support academic wellbeing is by putting in place this peer-led provision, using these SI Pass principles, and running our PAL programme. And like I said, it has to be grounded in principles. So we're running it, and in lots of other institutions, you do need to think about what flavour of PAL you're going to implement, how you're going to ground that in your principles. And then finally, to answer the overall question of the first slide, was well, how does UWE promote academic wellbeing with our students? And it's by giving students back the power. So it's giving them the confidence and the self-efficacy to feel empowered in their learning journey. It's promoting their academic wellbeing, and it's bolstering their sense of confidence when they go into that lecture or seminar. That's it. I don't have a question slide, but I'm happy to take questions.
Have we got any questions for Hannah?